In the dim light of an old London law office, Aaron Solomon sat back in his chair, the weight of the world pressing down on him. His life's work, his family's livelihood, was at stake. Solomon and Sons Limited, the company he had built from the ground up, was facing ruin, and with it, so was his family's legacy. It all began years earlier when Solomon, a dedicated and visionary shoemaker, dreamed of something larger than himself. He had started as a humble craftsman, stitching fine leather shoes in a small workshop. Business thrived, and as the years passed, he envisioned a company that could outlive him, a lasting empire for his children to inherit. In his twilight years, the dream took form. He incorporated Solomon and Sons Limited, transferring the business to the company, and distributed shares to his family members. But the world of business was as unpredictable as the English weather. Though he had transferred ownership of the company to the entity, the downturn in the market had left Solomon and Sons Limited in dire financial straits. Creditors began circling like vultures. Despite the company's failure, Solomon had acted with caution and foresight. The business may have been crumbling, but the company itself was distinct from him. Legally, it was its own person, separate from Solomon the man, bound by different rules and responsibilities. Yet not everyone saw it that way. As the creditors demanded payment, they turned their gaze from the company to Solomon himself. They argued that he, as the one who had shaped the company and controlled its operations, should bear the debts. After all, wasn't Solomon and Sons Limited the same thing? His fortune and reputation were now in the hands of the courts, and more importantly, a critical legal question loomed. Is a company truly separate from its owner? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation on the day of the trial. Lawyers and legal scholars flocked to witness the case that would shape the future of English business law. Solomon's lawyer, a sharp-minded barrister named Edmund Hardy, strode confidently to the bench. "My lord," Hardy began, "the case we are dealing with today is simple in principle, though monumental in its implications. The law as it stands has recognized that a corporation is a separate legal entity from its shareholders. The creditors demand that my client, Mr. Solomon, be held personally responsible for the debts of Solomon and Sons Limited. This demand flies in the face of established principles of corporate law." The judge, an austere figure with gray hair and a discerning gaze, listened carefully. Hardy continued, "When Mr. Solomon incorporated the company, he followed all the legal procedures. The company took on a life of its own, independent of its shareholders. This veil between the company and its shareholders must remain intact. To pierce this veil would be to unravel the entire fabric of corporate law." The opposing counsel, Mr. Kavanaugh, was unyielding. "Your lordship, this is no mere technicality. Solomon is the company. He held nearly all the shares and made every decision. To allow him to hide behind this so-called corporate veil is to sanction injustice. The creditors must be paid, and Mr. Solomon should be the one to pay them." Days later, the courtroom was silent as the judge prepared to deliver his verdict. Solomon sat in the gallery, his heart pounding in his chest. His fate and the future of corporate law hung in the balance. "My judgment," the judge began, "is a matter of great significance. The law has long recognized that a company, once incorporated, becomes a separate legal entity. It is a shield, protecting its shareholders from personal liability. The incorporation of Solomon and Sons Limited was done in accordance with the law, and thus the company and its founder, Mr. Solomon, are distinct." Solomon breathed a sigh of relief, but the judge was not finished. "However, while the law does create this veil, it is not absolute. It is the responsibility of the courts to ensure that this veil is not used to perpetrate fraud or injustice. In this case, though Mr. Solomon controlled the company, he did not misuse the corporate structure. Therefore, the debts belong to the company and not to Mr. Solomon personally." The court erupted into murmurs. It was a victory not just for Solomon, but for every future entrepreneur who dreamed of building something greater than themselves. The case had reaffirmed the principle of separate legal personality. A company was its own legal person, distinct from those who controlled it.